Welcome to Off the Cuff with Namrita. And here with me is Raghu Karnad. He's a award-winning journalist and writer. Raghu, welcome to Off the Cuff.
Thank you very much.
It is my honor. So, you know what? I know more about your father and I know more about your sister, Shalmari Radha, because I interviewed her some time back and I admire the work she's doing in Kenya.
Yes.
And you are a family of social activists, I'll say all of you. So, tell me, how did you decide to pursue journalism and uh, something about your childhood?
Well, my family was based in Bangalore for most of the time that I was growing up.
Okay.
Obviously, my father's work as an actor took him to Bombay a lot, but
Yeah.
they decided that we should live in Bangalore because there were good
Mm.
schools there. So my
Oh.
sister and I grew up quite separate from the world that we might otherwise have been in the
Mm.
middle of.
Mm-hmm.
She eventually became the doctoring type.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned, I always thought I was going to be a social worker
Okay.
or work in an NGO of some kind.
Uh-huh.
And after college, that was
Hmm.
my first job,
Hmm.
was in a
Hmm.
legal rights NGO. But
Okay.
it wasn't an NGO that was doing very much. So what I found myself doing at that time was that I picked up blogging, which is what
Oh,
everyone was doing
okay.
in those years.
Uh-huh.
And I found that I enjoyed it so much
Hmm.
that before I knew it, I had applied for some writing for some magazine jobs,
Hmm.
and that's how I
Hmm.
fell
Into the trap of
into the profession.
profession. Yeah. I.
Despite my best efforts to
Mhm.
not mirror my father's
Oh.
profession, it started pulling me in. Yeah,
Oh, okay. But you're doing it your way. You didn't.
yeah, we're
That is,
very
you
very very
have your own
different.
identity and you're doing it so well. I just started checking your interviews out recently, and you are the founder of Wire,
Well,
the
I'm part
online
of the founding
part of
team.
the finding team.
There were three
Hmm.
more senior journalists
Okay.
who are the founding editors,
Okay.
and there were two more of us, and we were
Hmm.
the team that started it up in 2015.
Okay, and I do follow Wire in because somehow, because we are all looking for the right sources to get information. And Wire, I have to say, is one of them, at least for me. I want to say, everybody should look at that. So, what is the best part of being a journalist in the new Bharat or India? I don't know what I can call. Yeah.
The best part, well,
Yes.
usually
Yeah.
that's
I don't want to say, oh, yeah, because everybody.
okay. I like that spin on the question. I think
Okay.
the best part is that the importance and the necessity of journalism
Hmm.
is more keenly obvious now than ever. It's like,
Oh, okay.
when I started
Hmm.
off as a journalist,
Hmm.
it was the middle of the
Hmm.
previous government, the UPA government.
Hmm.
It was very easy to be a journalist at that time.
Yeah.
There was a number of news magazines just in the English language.
Hmm.
There were news magazines.
Hmm.
There were numerous TV channels. There were all of the newspapers,
Hmm.
and it's fair to say that one could write anything, do anything without ever feeling any fear. You could challenge the
Very
government,
true.
and
Very
people did
true.
without much apprehension.
Hmm.
That part is no longer true. So whether you agree or
Hmm.
disagree with what people say about press freedom in India right now, it's impossible to deny that
Hmm.
journalists feel
Hmm.
intimidated, bullied, and harassed.
Hmm.
You can, you
Hmm.
might disagree about the basis of that, but the fact of how people feel,
Hmm.
and that's partly because a huge chunk of that ecosystem has
Okay.
been neutralized
Yes.
and has been turned
Yeah.
into
Hmm.
uh, almost exclusively pro-government messaging.
Yeah.
So the excitement about being a journalist now
Hmm.
is that the necessity of telling stories
Hmm.
that are challenging to tell,
Hmm.
um, of investigations and scoops, things like that are more difficult, and
Yeah.
so they also their necessity is much more clear now. The every effort you put in
Hmm.
is that much more unique and more special
Definitely,
than
it
it
gets
used to be.
tougher and tougher to get the right. Is it so like that, or like what is your main focus now? Like you said, it was much easier, right? And then, it's, voices of dissent were okay. But now, how are you navigating through this?
Well, I have a personal. There's the issue when it comes to me
Hmm.
is that I'm two things. I have a sort of identity crisis. I'm a literary writer and I write
Yes.
books
Yeah.
and I'm
Hmm.
very interested in history.
Yes.
And I would be doing more of that if it didn't feel that
Hmm.
now is an important time for journalism.
Okay.
So when my last book, Farthest Field, was published,
Yes.
it was in the months just before publication, after it
Mhm.
was done being written, that we started up The Wire.
Oh,
And so
okay.
that timing suited me very well.
Mhm.
But, and I got very much pulled into it. And
Yeah.
for the next couple of years,
Yeah.
working on journalism felt very important.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I would have, uh, it wasn't a conscious choice to step away from creative writing.
Oh,
And
okay.
I really miss it. It's really important to me.
You can always write another book. You did talk about history and what we are seeing. History is being blatantly abused and misrepresented and misused. How dangerous is it, on the socioeconomic environment?
Well, you know, history is complicated, and I think that
Yes.
any history that one receives that is not complicated
Mm,
is probably is definitely incomplete and probably to some extent false.
mm.
It's we find now that we get a lot of like hero and villain narratives from our history,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
I think that history is a very bad place to go and look for moral absolutes.
Okay.
But we used to have certain, it is true that the history that we received kind of in our social ecosystem
Mm.
was also selective in a certain way. And the intention of that,
Mm.
of that partiality
Okay. Mm.
was to create, was to encourage a kind of interreligious harmony and to create a sort of sense of
Okay.
social integration.
Mm-hmm.
What's changed
Mm.
is that the narrative that is being emphasized
Mm.
and the threads of history that are being that are getting a lot of attention
Mm.
and are really being warmed up right now are the ones that work in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And to not put too fine a point on it, what's happening in India
Mm.
is that the history um, that casts the presence of Muslims in India in the worst light is getting more and more and more attention.
Amplified. Yeah.
And if you want to do that, you
Mm.
can do that to any community.
Mm.
And as it happens, the current establishment wants to do that with the Muslim community. And where that leads, so in the at this moment, one can have a lot of sort of academic disputes about is that correct or is
Yeah.
that wrong.
Mm.
What you're saying about the about invasions or temples or rulers or sultans accurate or inaccurate?
Mm.
But what it all adds up to, this overemphasis and this, I would say, this mania,
Mm.
is something that has little to do with with history and has everything to do
Mm.
uh, with reshaping society,
Very true.
so that Muslim Indians essentially, so that we invalidate the existence of
Mm.
Muslims in India at all. And what
Mm.
happens after that, I think, is very, very dangerous. The whole process
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Mm.
comes with a huge danger.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the narratives are changing, and I think based on fear, and a lot of other things are, yeah, and we have to tread carefully. You know, just don't go on jumlas, which is आजकल तो एक जुमला बोल देते हैं and everybody, that's been posted in thousands of social media and
Yeah.
people just believe that. So don't believe what you don't
It's
know about.
yeah, I know. So it's this social, this kind of WhatsApp history is a
Yes.
very difficult problem.
Yeah.
And I found one solution. The only way to address
Hmm.
what WhatsApp histories
Hmm.
when they come to you, and I tell this to all of my family,
Okay.
is if it's on WhatsApp,
Don't.
assume that it's wrong.
Okay.
Don't assume that it's right, which is what a lot of
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah.
Assume that it's wrong,
Ah.
and then feel free to
Ah.
investigate further.
Perfect.
but it's extremely naive. And I think that even the very sophisticated people in my family fall for it.
Yeah,
So
we
there's
do.
something in it's not your fault
Yes.
if you fall for it.
Yeah.
But you must know
Mm.
that the only way to approach WhatsApp history with some integrity is to assume that it's wrong. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
One of my uncles sent around a video, and it was about a rock cut temple that had been cut into the side of a mountain. And it said, this is a benign example, of course, there are worse
Okay, I know,
examples.
but then, yeah,
And it said, uh, here is a glorious temple that was actually cut into the side of a mountain, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of tons of rock had to be excavated,
oh my
and
God.
nobody knows about it. It's unknown.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, that is amazing. But then I just looked up the name, and I was like, oh, that's actually the largest temple in Ellora, and it's a World Heritage Monument. And I've been there. So it is by no means unknown. It is as recognized as it's possible for a monument
The
to
way
be.
it was, oh,
But
okay.
it's just
Yeah, yeah.
decontextualized and framed as proof that
Something.
Hinduism has been
Yeah, that's what's
has
happening.
been
What a great example,
yeah.
I'll say. Yeah, I know.
And this uncle who spends all day on the internet
on the
didn't take the trouble to just Google it and say, is this unknown or is it one of the most famous monuments in the world?
you know, that's what's happening. Everything is so quick and easy, and everybody believes in short narratives these days.
Yeah.
Who is watching a 1 hour interview these days, or reading a 500 page book? Very few, I'd say. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that nobody is, but the majority is going by the WhatsApp narrative.
Yeah. So
It's sad.
I think you're right. And so my takeaway or my sort of my essential advice to this is tell your family members to treat everything they receive on WhatsApp as wrong by default.
Perfect. Yeah.
And also, if you want to claim to know about something, please do take the trouble to read the book about it, because the amount that your perspective on anything, whether you're a liberal or a traditionalist or a right winger or a left winger, the amount your perspective changes when you read the book
Very true.
is so profound,
Yes.
and it is almost always has a de-radicalizing effect on you,
Mm.
because history is always complex.
Yes, it is. It
Yeah.
is. That is true. And talking about the book, you did write Farthest Fields, an Indian story of the Second World War, right? Did I
Yes.
get it right? And you only said that it got rejected by many publishers when you were planning to, publish it. And but it won the Wyndham Campbell Literature Prize. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Was it a surprise to you? And how did you go about writing? Because it's a very unknown history about the Indian
About
angle there.
India and
Yeah,
World War II.
yeah.
Well, it was actually rejected by a few agents.
Agents, okay.
And luckily, I didn't have. I eventually found a good agent and never had to find out whether it was
Wonderful.
then rejected by publishers.
Okay.
And one of the lovely things about the Wyndham Campbell Prize is
Mm.
there's no short list or long list.
Mm.
You never get any intimation of the fact that you're being considered.
Mm.
You just wake up one day, as I did, and you
Oh.
get a phone call straight from
Okay.
a conference room in Yale,
Okay.
and then they tell you that you've been selected for this prize.
Mm.
And in this case, it happened 4 years after the book was published. So I wasn't even. So it was truly a surprise.
Okay.
But the book begins with a family connection that I didn't realize I had, a sort of hidden, forgotten story in my family.
Okay.
And it was a forgotten story that matched a larger forgotten story that is a national, missing piece of our national story, which is that so many Indians fought in the armed services in World War II.
Yes.
On behalf of the Allies.
Yeah.
And so many more. Every Indian, in every part of Indian life was transformed and touched by World War II. So in a sense, and by India in that period, I mean all of South, I mean Pakistan and Bangladesh as well, of course. There is a South Asian history of World War II, which is so profound and so dramatic, and as with everything connected to war, tragic, romantic, exciting, heroic, dreadful. But for some reason, we haven't received that as part of our piece of the historical legacy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure a lot of research went into it and a lot of time. Yeah,
Yes, quite a lot
because
of
you were,
research.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, like talking about war, now let's go to freedom. What does freedom mean to you, especially after COVID?
What does freedom
Yeah.
mean to me? Well, I've always had a lot of freedom. I have to have a check my privilege moment and admit
Okay.
that freedom to me is not something that uh, I've personally ever lacked.
Mm,
Um, although, to the extent that I've felt
mm,
uh, my freedom being challenged, it's happened in recent years.
okay.
Uh, I think of freedom. When you say what is freedom to me,
Mm,
what comes to mind most vividly
mm,
is the people who, unlike me, have really had to put in a lot of struggle and a lot of courage into securing their own freedom. So I think of people who
okay.
I've reported on,
Mm,
who are part of social movements,
mm.
and to me, like freedom is a question it's a word that's very banal. Most of the times
Yeah,
we
I can
use it.
understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm,
Um, but the place to
mm,
look to
mm,
really see what freedom is and how it comes into being
mm.
is to look at people like in tribal movements,
Very true,
in
very
in farmers
true.
movements,
Mm,
and see what it is that people have to do and what it is that they are
mm,
asking for. Um, this freedom of speech is the best example. We spend a lot of
mm.
time debating what freedom of speech is or isn't.
Yeah.
Like, do I have freedom of speech on
Mm,
Twitter? Is like, is it is someone's freedom of speech being taken away in the
mm,
context of? I know we can get very lost
mm,
in very minor distinctions,
mm.
but you you can really gain a lot of perspective on what freedom of speech is when you
Very true.
look at the life
Mm,
um, of a tribal activist, for instance, and you
mm.
see
Right.
that actually they're the simplest ability, the basic ability to be heard
Mm,
when you have a viewpoint about your own land and your own livelihood.
mm.
That freedom is so important and so profound and so difficult to access that there's something we have to take seriously about the freedoms um, that belong to and that are
Mm.
fought for by people in those
Yeah, yeah. I think
positions.
what you're saying is like a person who's sitting in a Tesla or has a, it's very subjective. Freedom for him or her or they whoever they are will be very different. But I think what you're saying is going down the depth of things, going down on the ground and seeing, like you're saying, okay, you are privileged, but you are going down and trying to see what's going down there, and then at least you're acknowledging your privilege and saying, okay, that is
Yeah.
acknowledging the freedom that you had to do whatever you wanted to do, but not everybody has that capacity.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
also, I think that, you asked what's the best part about being a journalist. The best part about being a
Yes.
journalist, as a general rule,
Hmm.
is how much you learn from other people who are very much
Absolutely.
unlike you.
Yes.
And so to complete the answer,
Hmm.
the amount that you can learn about freedom and its sort of fundamental importance
Hmm.
from someone who's marginalized
Ah,
is very profound, and it sort of makes a lot of our debates seem a little bit
I
um,
know.
like they occupy too much of
Yeah,
the airtime,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
some
But
more fundamental things need
yeah,
more attention.
absolutely, absolutely. One last question is anything you like about cinema, your dad's legacy? What kind of cinema do you like, or anything you like about it?
Uh, I I think everyone likes many things about cinema.
Okay.
I have a very strong I have a real weakness
Hmm.
for black and white films. I think this
Oh,
is a reaction
yes.
to the Netflix era
Yeah.
and putting on the TV and
Hmm.
seeing these incredibly saturated high def
Yeah.
sort of
Uh-huh. Uh,
productions that
yes, they're
they, they
blinding.
they're completely blinding. And I think my form of reaction to that is like wanting to go and watch black and white Hollywood classics mostly.
Okay. Hmm.
Um, and this is not particularly original, but I love the Humphrey Bogart
Oh, okay, yeah.
sort of style and milieu.
Okay.
Uh,
Mhm.
and I recently watched a film that I really enjoyed, which was in fact directed by my dad.
Oh,
Since you
okay. Which one was
brought
it?
up his legacy, which is called Utsav,
Utsav, yes.
and I probably should have watched it long ago,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
to my surprise, it is quite a funny, erotic,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very well
sexy
made.
film,
Yeah.
and that was a pleasant surprise.
I know because he's your dad and looking at his work, and because you will watch it from another angle, and we as his fans and audience will. But Raghu, it was so wonderful talking to you and conversing with you and learning from you, I'll say. And thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you.
And I will follow you now more so. Any last words you want to part with, and anything about Salah? Thank you, Salah 2023 for giving us this. Anything about Salah?
Well, mostly I just want to say that I think Salah is growing from. I mean, obviously Salah took a bit of a blow, like everything did because of the pandemic. But I love how much energy and conversation there is right out there, right now. There's so many people, so much energy, and the variety of people that have been invited this year is wonderful. Had we just had Saket Soni talking about human trafficking and migration, Ranjit Hoskote in the next room talking about poetry and translation with his incredible sort of finesse. And this is, I think that Salah is still at the beginning of turning into one of the best festivals in the world.
Very well said. Thank you and bye for now.
Shosha is a creative Indian restaurant located in the heart of Silicon Valley. Shosha is a woman-owned business that serves traditional Indian flavors assimilated with molecular gastronomy techniques. The best Indian bar with happy hours in the Bay Area serves handcrafted drinks inspired by flavors from India with modern craft cocktails that are presented in unique ways. Shosha is a modern take on traditional Indian cuisine. We specialize in corporate luncheon, anniversary celebrations, birthday parties, and catering. Do check us out for a memorable modern Indian dining experience. Shosha is located at 141 South Murphy Avenue in Sunnyvale, California.